as I'm with the band. So recently I started running again. Yeah, you can cheer. It was hard. I don't do it very often, but the reason that I started was because I really wanted to see a change in my life, in my health, and in my strength levels. And I did it because I had a really good support system of some really good friends and my husband. And I was thinking about it the other day, and I realized there's no amount of support or encouragement that was going to make those changes happen. I had to literally get up off the couch, and I had to go out there with them. I couldn't just let their encouragement be the thing that caused the change. I had to do something. I had to make an action. And I was thinking about it more, and I thought, I think it's probably what happens a lot of times as we come in here before the presence of God. We want to see God move in our lives a lot of times. We want to see change happen, but sometimes we're afraid to step out of our comfort zone. And I don't know what your comfort zone looks like this morning. Maybe it's something, raising your hands and doing something that really is out of your character. Maybe it's closing your eyes and being able to shut out the distractions that are coming in as we stand here before God and as we sing. Maybe it's both of those things. Maybe it's closing your eyes and raising your hands. And if you do that, just make sure that you don't fall over, because that's a possibility. I've done it before. But, or every once in a while I smack Matthias, who's standing next to me, because... But we just want to give you guys an opportunity this morning to enter into the presence of God and get out of your comfort zone a little bit. We're going to sing some songs about how reckless God's love is for us and how great God is. But we can't do it for you. We're going to sing with you, and we're going to encourage you, and we're going to try to challenge you a little bit. But you guys got to stand with us, and you got to sing, and you got to take a moment to step out of your comfort zone and connect with a God who loves you this morning so much. Would you guys stand with us?
Good morning. Hey, go ahead and have a seat for a minute. So there's this passage in a book called Matthew. It sets up one of the practices that the church for 2,000 years has participated in. And it's one of the things that if you're a regular churchgoer, I think sometimes there's a danger of anything that you do frequently losing its potency. And so we like to take a minute sometimes to just pause and remind ourselves about some of the things that we do and why we do them, so that we don't just go through the habit of going through the motion. And one of those moments is what has in many ways become, I think, so common, and yet is so, this is the paradox of it, it's also so sacred. It's what we call communion. So here's a moment in the scriptures that Jesus spent with his disciples, and it's where the whole communion originated. This is when it began. This is where it all started. It was dinner. They were having dinner together. The disciples had no idea it would be the last meal that they'd share together. They were pretty oblivious to most things that were going on at this point, and most of what Jesus was trying to teach them was just flying over their heads. So here they are, last dinner. He knows it. They don't get it yet. And at one point in the meal, he does this. He says, Jesus said to them while they were still eating, he took the bread, and he gave thanks, and he broke it, and he gave it to his disciples, saying, take this. This is my body. Now again, put yourself in this moment. So it's common. Everything about this moment is common. They're just having dinner. If Jesus was here today and this whole event took place in 2018 and he was, I don't know, if he was having McDonald's for dinner, it might be Diet Coke and French fries. But this was just what was on the table. So he just grabs the bread. It's a baguette. It's a whatever. Well, we know it would have been pita bread, right? He grabs this unleavened bread off of the table, and he tears it, and then he says, this is my body. So imagine that. You're eating, and suddenly Jesus grabs the French fries and snaps it in half and goes, this is my body. Like, that's a weird moment. Like, what? No, that's the French fry. And he's trying to lean into them with this principle that they're not ready to get yet. And he keeps going on, and he says, then he took the cup. And after he'd given thanks, he said, drink from it, all of you. This is my blood, the covenant which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. And I tell you, I will not drink from this fruit of the vine from now until the day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. So he has this moment that he creates this thing called communion, that in so many ways, no pun intended, it's a paradox. Because it's a very common experience, and yet it's a very sacred one at the same time. It's common in that as Jesus does it for the very first time ever, he uses just the elements that are at the table. There's nothing special about the bread. There was nothing special about the wine that he chose. It was simply the elements that were there. It was part of the dinner. It's common in that when he says later on throughout the Gospels, do this every time you gather. He opens up this moment to anyone and everyone who would acknowledge that there is a God and that Jesus is him. No matter how much you believe that, how little you believe that, how much you struggle but are still going that direction towards Jesus as Savior, he says this is open. There's no hoops to jump through, no class you've got to take. You don't have to have everything figured out and together. Who does? So there's this common nature to it, and yet, on the other hand, it's also incredibly sacred. Because it was the moment that he called not just his disciples then, but his church every day and every year since then. To partake in a moment, to reenact a moment that would remember the sacrifice that he was about to give. That hours later, he would literally be drug away by a battalion of soldiers. He would be stripped and beat. His body would be ripped apart. And then he would be laid down on the ground on top of a piece of wood. And they'd have nails driven through his feet and through his wrists. He'd be lifted up in front of everybody, beat more, and eventually he would die on that cross. And all of that, is the song we're about to sing, was him bankrupting heaven because of his love for you and I. And he says to his disciples, every time you gather, do this to remember me and what I did for you. And so one of the things that we do here at Paradox on a regular basis is we remember. And we remember through the practice of communion. And while it's this incredibly normal moment, I don't want us to ever rush into it and miss that it's also a sacred moment. That it's a moment so sacred that here's the verse that leapt out to me this last week in a different way than ever before. Jesus says, I tell you this, from now on I will not drink of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. So here's what he's saying. I won't personally take communion again until we all do it together in eternity one day. Like, I don't know if that does anything for you, but what a thought that 2,000 years ago, Jesus sat with his disciples and enacted a practice that the church for the last 2,000 years has been participating in that he's withheld himself from. And said, one day I'll do it again. But the next time I do it, it will be when you are with me in eternity and we're all at the table together. Like, what a cool thought. But in between now and then, he invites us to continue that practice to remember him. So here's what I want to do with you this morning is I want to invite you into that moment. And I want to invite you into it in a very open, normal moment, and yet also to treat it with a certain amount of sacredness. In other words, Paul, the apostle, would later write in the New Testament that if you are coming to the table and you have any ought against your brother, like leave the stuff there and go fix that first. And so even though communion isn't about, like, we're doing this because we've got our stuff together, we do that because even though we don't, God loves us and his great love for us was demonstrated on the cross. Even still, we make sure that when we go to that table, we do it with a seriousness in our heart that says, I'm coming here because I believe God's great love for me compels me to love him back. So here, I would just encourage you, if there's some business you need to do with God before you go to the table this morning, then do that. In your seat, in your chair, have a moment. Be real and be honest with him. Or maybe there's something here between you and another person. And you're not going to fix it this morning. You're not going to go powwow probably in the corner. But could you even be willing to maybe run across the room if you need to and just say to somebody if there's conflict, hey, I know there's a conversation we need to have. And I know we need to work some stuff out. But I can't go to the communion table this morning before we at least acknowledge that. Maybe you even take it together. Even if there's strife there, you take that communion together. But I want us to go to the communion table this morning with one another with a certain sacredness to this practice that for 2,000 years, countless men and women have done the exact same thing and had the exact same moment. And so the band is going to take us into this next song. And at a moment that you feel ready, I want to just invite you to go through that. And so what we do here might be a little different than what you're used to. At Paradox, we have tables set up at the back against the wall. There is juice and there is bread, and there is also gluten-free bread at each of the tables. Yuck, but you're welcome to that if you like. And what we do is we just take the bread, we dip it in the juice, and you take it right there at the table. Or if you want, sometimes people bring it back to their seat even. And when they're ready during that last song, they'll take it at their seat. But this whole next song is going to be about the love of God. We taught it to you last week, and we're going to sing it again this week, and it just felt like the most fitting song to use in a moment when we, like so many before us have done, remember. If you meowed, you're weird. So some of you have no idea what that happened. It's an insider. So I have recently, well, not recently, since I've been pastor here, I have been very vocal about the fact that I think cats are evil. They're wicked, wicked creatures. So they are. I'm not wrong. Bring your cat over. I'll let him meet my dog, and then we'll see. Good morning. So that's great. Great to see you guys here. Glad you're here this morning. Even with an hour less sleep, we have begun in the last 45 minutes to affectionately refer to the first service this morning as the oops, I forgot it was daylight savings service. Glad you guys are here. How many of you, show of hands, how many of you, honestly, you forgot and you meant to be here at the first service today? Anybody? Anybody? Two of you. It's awesome. All right, a couple of things I need to let you know about before we jump into the content that's going to wrap up our series this morning. We have this really super big event coming up in a few weeks. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's called Easter. Pretty big deal in the church. So Easter, we have a couple of things that we're going to be doing. Number one, we are redoing what we call the invitation from last year. If you were here with us last year, you might remember this, but we tore down this whole place and set the entire facility up to represent a variety of moments that Jesus had to go through as he walked his way to the cross. And when we met with the couple that's doing this, Mark and McCare Gordon, they're a part of our church. Many of you, I'm sure, know them. McCare does this with a team of people all around the place outside of Paradox. So she presented it to us as an idea. We fell in love with it, thought it was a great idea. We decided to do it last year. And we thought, man, this is going to be awesome. And it ended up being incredible. For those of you that went through it, I think one of the things that we saw that were kind of managing it and hosting it is that almost everybody that went through at the end of it not only was personally moved, but also concluded, I've got to call somebody up and get them here to go through this. And a lot of the people that participated in it participated because they got a last-minute invite from somebody that came. So I hope this year, knowing what it was like, you will make that invitation ahead of time and bring people with you that you'll plan to come. We are going to do it very similar to last year. We're going to host it on Thursday and Good Friday. The times they should be in your handout this morning, and the times that we're going to be doing it, but we have a large block of time on both days that we're opening that up for you to just be able to go through. If you know ahead of time when you think you will go, it would be helpful for us just to manage that. If you could sign up for us downstairs. You don't have to sign up to attend. If you could and you know when you're going to go, that would be helpful for us. So downstairs as you walk out, over to the right before you leave, there's a table that you can go sign up and let us know what time slot you're going to take if you know ahead of time. But the invitation is going to be happening Thursday, Friday. I can just speak for myself, and I think for so many others, though, it was, of all the years that I pastored Paradox, it was probably one of the most powerful things I have done to personally just prepare me for that weekend and for Easter morning. So I hope you'll join us for that. Also, we have, everybody that walked in this morning, you got a couple of cards on your seat. Because we want you guys to take these, to use these, to start inviting people to Easter. Easter is just one of those times a year where everybody is more open than they are usually throughout the rest of the year to an invitation to come to church. That's what we do, right? Everybody goes to church come Easter, but without that invitation, most of us will just default back to what we're used to. Maybe mom and dad's church or a church we grew up in, and not necessarily the place that is going to bring us the most life and maybe necessarily speak to us in a way that rattles us outside of just what we're used to in our routine. So I hope that you'll use these this year. I hope you'll pass them out. But here's what I also know. I tell you this all the time. Off this stage, I am very much an introvert. I feel like I'm very socially awkward half the time. I try to get in conversations. My wife is the one that makes half my friends for me because I stumble all over my words and my feet. So if I'm you and I'm sitting out there and you're like, use this card, invite to Easter, I'm like, there's a certain personal barrier I have to intentionally cross to be able to hand this to somebody and invite them to church. So if that's me, that's probably some of you as well. So I want to, really quickly, I just want to encourage you with a story that I heard recently that was all about a simple invitation with a card. Toomey Tuesday. Is she here? Are you here this morning? Tuesday? Toomey Tuesday? I got your name totally backwards. I know her really well. Tuesday Toomey. So I'm going to totally put you on the spot. Come here. She wasn't here in the first service, so she had no idea I was going to do this. So Tuesday, if you don't know who Tuesday is, she runs our PB&J ministry. You can come on the stage. You can come up here. I don't bite. So she runs the PB&J. The PB&J is, correct me if I get any of these details wrong, basically 2 times a month. Once a month. We make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. How many do we make approximately? Hundreds. By we, I mean many of you and several people outside of Paradox. She manages all of this, brings them to her, and then she has a team that takes those sandwiches downtown and feeds the homeless. So I think it was Thanksgiving. What happens around then that we hand out candy? Halloween, that's what it is. Last Halloween, you were handing out candy and decided to hand out cards.
Yes, we gave candy to the kids. Oh,
Look at that.
excellent. This is too much power for me.
I know, it is.
We decided to give out candy to the kids because we're not monsters. And for the adults, my husband and I, Matt's right there, decided to give out invitations to Paradox along with bagels because parents don't really want to eat candy all night. So we gave them bagels and invitations to Paradox. And it was
Okay,
kind of fun.
so you did that, and one of the people that actually got that invitation was a woman named Brittany. And unbeknownst to you, Brittany actually started attending Paradox, and then got involved with PB&J when she heard about it, not necessarily making the connection yet that you manage PB&J, shows up the first time to drop off sandwiches, and just being your friendly self, you ask her, how did you find out about Paradox? And she says,
You invited me. I was like, oh my gosh, I did?
so now is here, a part of Paradox, serves, attends a small group, and it was all because of a simple card invitation. And I think, Brittany, are you here this morning? There she is. So, all right, give me the power back. So listen, I'm only bringing it up because when we hand these things out, I think sometimes, here's the tendency, is that we could take these things and just pitch them. And I'll be really honest with you, we even debated whether or not to put one or two on your chair this morning. And the reason is because we thought if we put two, are they just going to throw one away? Because I know that that's an easy tendency, is just throw one away. Listen to me. Without being over dramatic to the story I just shared, I do want to just be frank and honest and say this could be a Brittany. And it's all about whether or not you use it. And so I hope that you'll really consider, like, who's God put in your life? Who's he putting on your heart? That this Easter needs to sit in this room and hear about the great love of God that bankrupted heaven on our behalf. So I hope you'll use it. All right, so here's what we're going to do this morning. We have been in a series called Love, Sex, and Dating, or that we realized after having named that series, the acronym is LSD. Oops. And so we are in this series for the last 4 weeks. Today is the last week of it. We're going to wrap that up. Next week, we'll do 2 weeks that are going to lead us into Easter. But this morning, we thought weeks and weeks and weeks ago when we planned this series out that a great way to end this series would be to wrap it up by hearing from you instead of just me as the series comes to a close. So here's what I mean. My wife and I, we've been married this fall. It will be 22 years that we've been married. And I remember when we first got married, like all the stories about how that first year is the hardest. You know what I mean? You ever heard that? Maybe you're in the first year, you're like, I heard it, or maybe it is like the hardest. I remember everybody telling us, your first year is going to be so hard. I mean, like I'd lived on my own. She still lived at home. We were just bringing our lives together and all that mix, and we just thought, this is awesome. Everybody kept telling us it's going to be really hard. So we get into the first year, it was amazing. Like I got through the end of the first year, and I thought, man, we are pros at this. Like we are so awesome. Second year, incredible still. Like, we just had a great time. Year 3, year 4, a little bit of stuff starts to come out. Year 5, we're like, we don't like you anymore. Like year 5 is when things just started to go, ooh, it just kind of implode a little bit. It was also the time frame that we had started talking about having kids. And I just knew that given some of my own baggage growing up, I wasn't prepared to be a dad unless some stuff inside me got dealt with and I figured out what to do with. So I started going to counseling, which was tremendously helpful, also disruptive. I mean, this guy, good friend of mine, total guru as a therapist. I mean, he just flipped my bowl of Cheerios upside down, and we began to resort all of it, and it was good. Now, my wife, she's shared this story before many times over the years, including publicly, shares that during that time, her mentality was, I'm glad he's going to counseling. He needs it. And so there was one point, which I did. There was one point in our relationship, though, with the counselor that my friend Scott, who's counseling me, said, hey, why don't you bring your wife along, and maybe we'll all do this, and I'll bring my wife Joy, and we won't do it in the office, because that was already intimidating enough. I'll never forget that day, like, sit on the couch, like, oh, boy, here we go. So he said, we'll go to my house, and just bring Nicole, and Joy will be there. I'm like, okay. So Nicole, my wife, tells a story that by the time we got done with that, she had walked in going, I'm here to support him, and by the time we got done, she was like, I don't know why he married me. And it just, for both of us, it just flipped things upside down. And it began to, I think, make us start sorting through and both of us dealing with stuff that we needed to, that I think in many ways is why 22 years later, not only are we still together, and even though we have our moments still, we certainly do like anybody else, our relationship is stronger than it's ever been. Our affection for one another is more potent than it's ever been. And that was a big part of the process. But what happened during that time, a big part of what happened wasn't just meeting with a counselor. When you start to meet with a counselor and you realize, oh, I guess this stuff is not abnormal. Like, okay, so we're not completely strange. It's not like we're from Mars, like, okay, we're human beings that just struggle. Then we got brave enough to start to open ourselves up to just other friends and other friendships. Particularly some friendships that, they weren't like leaps and bounds ahead of us, but they were a little further down the road of this thing called marriage. They had learned a few things that we hadn't. And over time, the more and more that we got open and other people were open with us and we just did life together as couples, we realized more and more that we really weren't that abnormal. And it's never ceased to amaze me, all the years I've been a pastor, how often we tend to think that whatever we're struggling with, whether it's as an individual or whether as a couple, that nobody else must have our problems. And when you think that, you will automatically withdraw from people because you think you're weird, you're abnormal, nobody else has a struggle. But here's what I have found time and time again to be true. Ain't nobody that's got struggles that nearly everybody else doesn't have. Like we all do. And when you start to get open about that, it suddenly normalizes what you're going through. And you feel like when things are normal, you feel like there's hope. Because when you feel like I'm the only one going through this, it's like maybe there's no hope. Maybe I can never get over it. Maybe things can never be different. So what I'm really excited to do this morning is invite up a group of people. There's 5 couples that have agreed to take the stage this morning and open up their lives and their marriages as much as we can in the time frame we have to you and give you a sneak peek into what they're doing, how they're struggling, how they're succeeding, how they're winning, some days how they're even losing, but how they are together pursuing Jesus and pursuing one another. Now, let me just say a couple things before they take the stage because I know they're all ready to start coming up. If you're in here right now, it could be really easy for you to go, well, there's married couples about to take the stage. Doggone it, I should have stayed home today. I knew that at daylight savings. This doesn't apply to me. I'm not even married. Listen, it doesn't matter. I have countless times over the years of my pursuit of Jesus, I have found men and women who have impacted my life who don't necessarily fit in the same context of life that I do. Their lives are different for whatever reasons. There are people that are going to sit on the stage who are loving Jesus and loving one another, and whether you're married or single or divorced or wherever you fall on that spectrum, you can learn from them. The scriptures call us to do 2 things in this life. It is to love God and to love people, and what you'll hear from these people today is how they're trying to do that. Their context that they're going to speak about specifically is in marriage, but I think that gives us all something to learn and to hear from. And there's a lot of different couples that we could have possibly picked from Paradox. But I think the reason that I wanted these couples up here is twofold. Number one is that they are dedicated to one another and to Jesus in their pursuit. And number 2, they're loving each other. Like there's a joy. Now you'll hear, it's not perfect. There are days that there's struggles, but there is a passion and a joy between them. Because sometimes I think when we talk about marriage and we talk about the challenges of marriage, we can default to the very easy picture, which is just divorce. And in our, I don't know if you realize this, but in our state alone, there's about 700 divorces a week that take place. There's a lot of moments every single week, hundreds of them, of broken dreams and broken hearts, painful moments. But that can't be the only thing we look at, right? Because how about you add to that number all the thousands more marriages that just stay together and are completely unhappy and just put up with each other. What I love about the couples that you're going to hear from this morning is that in their losses and in their victories, these are couples that have learned to continue to grow passionate for one another as well. So, because it can be a bit of an intimidating thing to stand on this stage, let alone to open your life up to a lot of strangers, would you just welcome them and let them know you appreciate them doing this? And you guys go ahead and take the stage. So the first thing I've asked them to do this morning, by the way, there's bottles of water down there if you guys want to just pass those around. I have asked them if they just kind of take a minute and one of each couple just share a quick bio. Like let us know kind of who you are and kind of what makes you you in this relationship.
I'm Tim. This is my lovely bride, Chrissy. We have been married, will be 28 years this May. And we have 2 grown children, Adam and Abby, who are both here and probably really concerned that I'm going to overshare up here today. So,
I am Bruce. Renee's in front of me, my wife. And we've been married 30 years in May 14th. 2 adult children who are not here. But that's about it.
My name's Casey Bueller, and this is my wife Tammy, sitting in front of me. We're considered the newlyweds of the group. We bring to the table 6 children, 4 in which I brought to the relationship from a previous marriage, and 2 that she brought to the relationship from a previous marriage. That's the beginning of our story.
Hi, I'm Nancy, and this guy behind me is Rick, my husband. And we've been married 45 years. And I met him when I was 13, started going with him when I was 14. And we have 3 kids. Eric is 42. Kevin is in heaven. He's 38, forever 38, and Lindsay's 32. And we have a beautiful granddaughter and a grandson. That's it.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Perioski. Dennis, my husband, behind me. We have been married 21 years. It will be next month. We have 7 kids. We have a 20-year-old, almost 19-year-old, and then a 16-year-old, 14-year-old, 11-year-old twins, and a 7-year-old. The only kids who are here are the 3 younger ones. When my 2 who are home but older found out we were doing this, they asked if they could sleep in and not come.
So one of the common reasons that I asked all of them, why are you willing to do this? Because this is a bit intimidating to sit up here and to be a little bit vulnerable with you. And I just want you to know on their behalf that the reason they're up here is because they've learned what I was talking about earlier, that you got to have people in your life. You got to invite others into this. That marriage, like any other relationship, just isn't meant to be lived in isolation. And they want to be here not just for this stage, but for you off this stage. And so one of the things that they're open to is whether today or in the future or at any point that you may want to approach them, you may want to talk to them. As you hear, there's different dynamics in all of these relationships that maybe some of you sit out there and you resonate with somebody up here and you go, man, I need to pick their brain. I need to sit with them and learn from them for a little bit. And I've had many people, my wife and I, throughout the course of our lives that have played roles like that. And some of them have become our best friends. And some of them just were there for a season. But it was a necessary and it was a growth season for us. And maybe one of these couples would be that for you. And I know that they're here because that's what they hope for as well. Not just to stand on stage, sit on stage and share, but off the stage, I know what they're excited about is a chance to serve you however they can. So with that, I want to dive in. I want the group to hear more from you than from me. So the first question, we have some questions we prepared, but we're also just going to go with this a little bit, which seemed to work in the first service. But the first question I wanted them to just share with you is, just to be honest, normalize for all of us in the room, what in your opinion is beautiful about marriage and what's frustrating about it? It's always dangerous to go first, by the way.
Yeah, right. So, as I said before, the companionship in a marriage is what I find beautiful. You always have someone there for you that's going to fight for you, that's going to take your side, That's important in a marriage. You have to be on each other's side. And that, to me, is one of the most beautiful things about our marriage. There's many things that go along with it, but just the companionship and that, the knowing that who you're with is going to be there for you and with you.
And I'd like to say, just being with that person that you love so much every day, going to bed with them, waking up with them, spending the day with them is just so awesome. I was going to say something else, I forgot. Okay, I pass.
I'd say there's a lot of beautiful things about being married to Bruce for 30 years, but the companionship, he has my back, I have his back. We've shared life together. We've been together for 34 years. The flip side of that is we've been together for 34 years. We live together. We're both ugly to one another, and there's no escaping one another sometimes. So extending grace to one another during conflict and during those bad days is the challenge. But the help or the strength or the ability to extend grace goes back to the fact that he's really important to me and I'm really important to him, and that helps us to extend that grace to one another.
One of the things that maybe Nancy forgot, it's that we don't have to, but we get to share everything. We share all the good, and we share the bad, and we talk about it, and we deal with it. And she mentioned the bad. We never in our 45 years have gone to bed during a conflict. We never go to bed angry. We either talk it out or, well, we talk it out, yeah. And speaking of that, there was a time most recently here, I think, and I brought it up in the first service, where she mentioned something about, sharing the bed. Well, I got a lesson, how to stay on my side 101, and she was showing me how to do that. And okay, here's what you do: you get on this side, and when you want to turn over, you turn over on your side. So I was trying to tell her, well, the reason I roll towards you is because I want to stroke your hair, or I want to play with your ears. And she said, well, that keeps me awake and everything. Anyway, we had a good time, and she started to laugh, and then the next thing you know, she sat up on the edge of the bed and was laughing so hard. On my side, there was a little damp spot. And I don't know, some of you ladies might be able to relate to that. I don't know, but anyway, I did remember that part from the first service. So.
That's good.
But
that's good.
Basically, getting back to just sharing everything is a big part of. But sharing everything, and just like I just did, I think.
So whoever guessed that Rick would be the first to overshare wins.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I probably should stop now.
He gets the pot of gold. Wow.
Don't look at me. I can't save you out of this one. No, I think one of the cool things, it's one of the beautiful things, one of the challenging things is we've grown up together, right? We got married very young. We got married when we were 20, and we weren't prepared to deal with all the things we've dealt with, but we've dealt with them together, and it's really cool that you find someone that you trust. You go through some things, and I think both of us had the opinion of marriage when we went into it, even though we were young. We expected to work through anything that came our way, and knowing that I never had to doubt that has been really cool along the way. We've had ups and downs, but we've made a life together. And starting at 20, actually at 16 when we started dating, it could be very challenging. And there was times of immaturity, and there's times of immaturity now, mostly on my side. But it's just really cool that we've made a life together from a very young age.
One of the things that I think is really beautiful about marriage, there's a theme of like togetherness that you guys have all said, but the one thing that jumps out to me is that this guy behind me loves me, all of my good parts. I think they're good parts. But what stands out to me even more is that he loves all the bad. And there's a lot of bad because I'm human. I'm broken, and I can be mean, and I can be selfish, and I can be, a lot of things that aren't nice. But the fact that somebody loves you and loves all of you and accepts all of you and is committed to stay with you through the good and the bad on the days where I'm kind and loving and on the days where I'm not so kind and loving, that to me is a really beautiful thing because you don't get that often in life. Friendships, the minute you screw up, they piece out of there. But just to be in this marriage and know that he loves me, I am 110% confident that he loves me and he loves all of me, the good and the bad.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that point, and it's kind of a point that Renee mentioned, extending one another grace. So grace to me in a marriage is where you give your spouse the benefit of the doubt, or you give your spouse the best possible read or interpretation. So rather than, like in the theater of your mind, going to a real negative place, going critical toward your spouse, Again, like Rebecca said, there are times where she may not be the best version of herself, or there are many times where I'm not the best version of myself. And I think it's those times where you're able to give each other grace as opposed to judgment is really significant in a marriage.
I wonder if I could use that with my wife. Sweetheart, right now I don't feel like you're being the best version of yourself. You think that'd go good?
I don't think
That'll work.
I doubt it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something, what I couldn't remember before. The thing I think is beautiful about being married is growing old together. I just said that to Rick yesterday, that boy, it's so nice to grow old together, to have someone that you can share that with and that you love. Older.
Awesome. Older.
We don't feel like we're old
Well,
yet.
let me. So one of the questions I want to set you up with, and then I want to hone in on you two for just a brief minute. But here's the setup question. Think about it. What are some of the must-dos that you think, in your opinion, have to take place to develop a lasting, loving marriage? So now, as you're thinking about that, you two, like I love what I'm hearing up here. This is good stuff. But here's the reality. A lot of us in this room, outside this room, we're not still with the person that we were with. And there's a lot of people that have had that moment where things were devastated. The last thing that we want to communicate from this stage is that that's the only picture of hope, right? And some people have had a story more like yours, where you went through a divorce. And I know, especially you, Tammy, because I've known you longer, I know there were moments where there's some really dark moments where you didn't know what God was up to or how that was going to turn around or that there were any good days to come yet. Can you tell us a little about what that was like for you two to journey through that and how God brought hope out of those broken moments?
I think that once I took my eyes off of myself in my situation, and like, oh, poor me, I'm divorced and I don't know if life will ever be the same and ever be good. Once I took my eyes off of that and put them on God and realized that He has a plan for me and that He is for me, and that He's going to find something good for me, and just relaxed and went with that, and not even so much like worried about, oh, my next husband or whatever, but just really like trying to find out who I am in Him, and that just means like just really praying and studying the Bible in the morning, like just pulling it out, sitting at the table, just going through verses, and just having Him speak to me through what I was reading. That started to change my mind and my outlook.
For me, my divorce was it's a nasty divorce. It involved 4 children. So that played a huge part in how I tried to handle things. But in that being said, at times I thought, man, my world is done. It's over. And but you really have to focus on making the best out of everything. If you go into a situation with, I'm never going to get through this, that resonates through everybody you know, believe it or not. People around you kind of take on the same attitude that you do. And that started to take on that attitude with my children, that I had the attitude that this is never going to work out. I'm never going to find happiness again in my life. And then it brought my children down. So you have to look forward and know that there's something better. And in all honesty, until Tammy and I got together, my walk with God was nearly inexistent. I grew up in and out of a church with my parents, but my walk with God on a personal level was nearly inexistent. It was not there. In the last 4 years of our marriage and coming to this church and being welcomed by each and every one of you here has changed my life completely in that aspect. God has changed my life through each and every one of you guys. And I'm thankful for it. It's been a struggle. It's going to continue to be a struggle. But if you can learn how to walk with God or just look to God and try to find answers, that's the only thing. I mean, it's hard to do sometimes. I'm not somebody that sits down at the table like she does and goes through Scripture and things. I have my conversations with God on my way to work while I'm driving, you know. And it 99% of the time it involves our marriage and our children. Just trying to give God what you have, the struggles that you have, can be tough, but it's necessary. And when you do it, you will find that your life isn't always easy, but it becomes much more peaceful. And through our walk together, our marriage together, I've learned that, and I'm still learning many things about it, but it's been great.
Thanks, guys. So what about the other question? What are some of the things you guys have learned that you think are the must-dos to have a marriage that is loving and lasting?
Spending time together alone is, I mean, literally, like, you have to make time for each other. Just, you know, like we said, we have 6 children, and everybody up here has that, you know, has children at some point. But you have to make time for each other. Spend time together deliberately. Make that time, and you know, it's very important in a marriage, in a relationship period. Is just
because even when it's not
together.
kids, it's like life just fills up your time, and suddenly you don't have time for each other.
Absolutely, make the time. That's all I can say. If you don't, you're going to regret it.
I'd say another really important thing is to drop your expectations. It's not good to have expectations for lots of things, but, you know, in marriage, like, drop them. Because you're not going to get your way all the time. Things aren't going to go the way that you think that they should all the time. So just drop your expectations. Forgive and forget. Don't hold on to things. Let them go. Don't keep a running tally of, like, wrongs against you. That's not going to work. I don't know. I have more, but I'll let other people share.
I think the thing that turned around my attitude toward Bruce and toward our marriage was that I put a lot of expectation on Bruce. Bruce was supposed to meet my every need, emotional, physical, whatever it was, and that was way too much pressure to put on him. So when I spent time reading the Bible, praying to God, and relying on God to meet that expectation, when Bruce fell short or when he did something that I didn't think was quite enough, it all of a sudden became wonderful. And I called it relying on God for everything else, and then Bruce was the frosting. So everyone, my thing is the cake is only the vehicle for the frosting. So frosting is the best part, and so that made Bruce's efforts, no matter how big or how small, the best part.
So is that like her nickname for you? Frosting?
Frosty.
Sorry, I feel creepy even saying that.
Thanks, Tim.
How about anybody else?
I know there's one thing. Oh, you were going to say something? I'm sorry. There's one thing that I think is really important now that Nancy and I are pretty much empty nesters. Our children are gone and out of the house and in heaven. And we have a lot of time to spend together now. We have trouble trying to find out what should we do. Well, she doesn't like the same movies I like, and so we do play some games around the house sometimes.
But he watches The Bachelor
Scrabble.
with me.
Oh, I wasn't going to bring that up again, but I think something that is important for those who are married, those who are in a relationship, to the men, God designed us to be spiritual leaders of the household, and I believe that it's necessary for us to be their protectors, their providers, their tender warriors. Be a tender warrior for your wife or your significant other. Or you have to be the person that she relies on and depends on. And in fact, I told my son-in-law when he married my daughter, I had a long talk with him at the altar during the wedding. And he's like 6'8", so he had to bend down and talk to me. And I told him, not everybody knows this, but these are the words I spoke to him. I said, you are now the most important man in her life, and she will depend on you. Make sure that she knows that every day. So men, step up. Be the tender warrior that your wife needs you to be. And you can be intimate with her without sexual things. You can Scratch her back when she's at the sink washing dishes, but if she's cooking, leave her alone because it doesn't happen at my house very often.
Well, and clearly don't rub her hair when she's trying to fall asleep
Don't
either.
rub her hair, period.
Stay on your side of the bed.
And stay on my side of the bed. Anyway.
Rick, you said something during the first service, too, that I thought was gold, and I'd love you to repeat that here if you can remember.
Oh, yeah.
You had talked about her feelings and other people's feelings.
Yes. It's that we share our feelings back and forth together, negative or positive. Always share your feelings and talk them out. And you can't tell someone how to feel. They are going to feel the way they do. Do not even try to say you shouldn't feel that way, because I don't believe you would like them to tell you you shouldn't feel a certain way. You feel how you feel at that point in time, and that's how it is. So don't try to tell anybody how to feel ever.
Yeah, I just know in many of my own moments of conflict, it's probably one or both of us trying to essentially convince the other one that what they're feeling and where they're at is wrong.
Exactly. Why are you feeling that?
Yeah.
What has happened? I don't feel that. Why do you feel that way? And especially to a woman, don't tell her how to feel. And that's my words of wisdom for 45 years of marriage. Don't ever try to tell her how to feel. Supposed to hold this up.
One of the things that Renee and I do for us is, as our kids were growing up, our two kids are adults now, but we focused on ourselves through the relationship. We went on dates, even what if they're small or big, doesn't matter. We also found couples at our old church that we were able to swap kids. They watched their kids. Let me start there. We watched their kids one week and on a day, and we swapped the next week. So we give the opportunity for the couples to go out by themselves. That's key to the marriages. You focus on each other. Kids are second. You love them, you nurture them and teach them. But now that we're adults, or the kids are adults and we're empty nesters, a lot of couples have trouble, hey, I don't have any kids to focus on. Well, that's one reason why we did it our way. Or what we've learned over the years is you focus on each other, then when your kids are grown, you're still passionate about each other, and you can keep going. One of the other things we also learned is Renee does her devotions in the morning, and I do mine in the morning, but at work, and then I'll send texts to her of what I learned, and then we talk about it, or either in the evening or in the course of the day. So those are some aspects that we do to help our relationship. We focus on God is key to our marriage as well.
I guess to piggyback on that, Rick said that we can't judge each other's feelings and we can't tell them how to feel. I can't judge Bruce and his relationship with the Lord, and I can't try to make it mine. So there would be times that I would get so much out of reading the Bible and praying that I would just want him to have it, and I would expect him to only get that in the way that I got it in the morning. So if he wasn't spending hours in the morning with his Bible and praying, I was a stay-at-home mom. I had a little bit more time. But then I thought he was missing out on something. And I learned that his relationship with Jesus looks different than my relationship with Jesus. And it doesn't mean that he doesn't have one and his isn't as deep and as rich as mine because he isn't spending it exactly the same way that I do. So praying for each other and texting each other, hey, I prayed this for you this morning, and I learned this in the Bible this morning. That has been really encouraging to us, and that's the way we share our relationship with Jesus.
And you got to have fun together. Some people go on trips, some go for a date night, but me and Rick go to the grocery store. And we have so much fun. We just really screw around and have a lot of fun. But you just got to have fun.
We have a little game we play.
Do we want to know what this game is?
It's cool.
You
You
play
guys
it,
should
not
try
me.
this. It's really kind of funny. It's called Who Done It. So she likes to push a basket because she feels more secure pushing a basket for some reason. Maybe it's because her purse on. So I just walk up and down the aisle, and I wait and see when there's like someone at one end of the aisle and we're in the middle. And if I can work one up, I'll let it go. And then I run around the end cap and turn back and look and see if they walk up by Nancy and what their reaction is. But she's the only one in the aisle. It's a riot. You guys really should try.
I'm sorry, Paradox.
Not all of these
Sorry.
are going to be good tips, guys.
But it is fun. Okay, carry on.
That's how you make it for 45 years. Who done it? Who done it? Who done it?
If I can just change
Please.
gears there. One of the things, based on what Rick was saying, that you can't judge your spouse's feelings, what your spouse is feeling or going through, or try to like delegitimize what they're feeling. I think one of the really rich aspects of our relationship has been times where maybe we haven't been doing too well, but we've been able to kind of come together and repair the relationship. And so the repairing of the relationship has been really rich. And just recently, there was an opportunity where Rebecca was attempting to connect with me emotionally, and I kind of dismissed her attempt. I didn't pay attention to it. And the very next day, she sent me a text message. And the text message expressed her hurt and how it was difficult for her to have made that attempt where I didn't reciprocate, I didn't respond. And in the past, early on in our marriage, I would have received that message in a negative way. I would have felt attacked by that message. I would have felt like she was accusing me of something, and I would have felt threatened. And most likely, I would have probably just continued to hide and not engage. And so when she sent me the text this time, I told her that I appreciate you sending it to me. I appreciate you sharing your heart. And the point I want to make there is, I think it's important to accept your spouse's influence. So when your spouse is attempting to say something that is sharing their heart or their emotion, they're attempting to make that connection, rather than resisting it or arguing against it, really try to understand it. Again, kind of going to the point that Rick was bringing up. You know, I could have dismissed the text. I could have dismissed Rebecca's heart, but no. Her feelings were her feelings, and it was significant what she shared. And then it gave us an opportunity to have a really cool conversation where we got away and kind of made a date out of it, and we resolved it, and it was good.
I think one of the things that I draw from that is you kind of learn, right? Marriage is about learning about one another and caring enough to learn about one another. And Christy and I have had to learn how to disagree and learn how to argue and learn how to fight and learn how to resolve that and learn how to say we're sorry and all those kind of things. And one of the things that she's, I think, learned is that if I'm upset about something, she kind of gives me space for a little while to pout and do my thing. But at some point, she's always better at initiating trying to resolve it and wanting to talk through it. As a guy, I generally just want to shut down and say, I'll be fine, just give me enough time. But that doesn't really fix it. And she does a great job of saying, okay, without saying the words to make me angry, it's basically, you've had enough time to pout. We need to talk about this now. And maybe then I was almost over it, but we still need to go through it. But it's an important aspect to learn those things. That's not something that you'll often get right day one, and if you do get it right day one, 10 years down the road, you might approach things differently. 20 years down the road, you might approach things differently, and you've got to constantly learn, and that can be one of the frustrating things that says, you know, wait a minute, we handled it this way last time. Can't we just do that again? Because that worked out really well. But it's constantly changing and being willing to learn about one another and respect how people want to argue, respect how people want to fight, and it may take a little while.
I think, too, even going back to, because there's a lot of communication, that's a theme I'm hearing, but that for us has been a struggle, believe it or not. I mean, being married 21 years, you would think you'd have the communication thing down, but we don't. We don't ever fight because we don't communicate well. We're avoiders, and so I don't like conflict, he doesn't like conflict, so if there is anything, then we both run, but we've been trying to get better at that, and that's why I felt more freedom to kind of. So it's still a little scary. I didn't want to like have a face-to-face and say what I texted him. It was safer to text it. But over the last several years of being married, I don't know why, but it's just been a scary thing for me to communicate. Maybe because of the way I grew up, when I would communicate emotions or feelings to my parents, I was shut down. And so part of that, the way you're raised, obviously you bring that baggage into your marriage. And so the one thing that I have always said to my kids, and I'm starting to say it now in my head to myself in my marriage, is he can't fix what he doesn't know. So it's not fair if I am feeling frustrated or hurt to not say anything, because then I'm almost as much at fault, because I'm not giving him the opportunity to make a change or to say I'm sorry. Or even in this case, it was huge. We went and we talked, and this issue could have been a huge issue that really divided us. Or, you know, I had the choice when he asked me, will you forgive me? I had that choice to forgive him and move on or not. And I chose to forgive him and move on, because it takes a lot more effort to stay angry and to hide and to ignore than it does to just let things go. But yeah, you have to be willing to communicate those things, as awkward as it is or uncomfortable it is. If you're like me and you don't like the fight and the conflict, you have to move into it, because nothing gets better if you don't.
So one of the dynamics, it's a bit of a broad stroke here, but one of the realities for most of the people here that have kids, although some of them are like you guys, kids are older and grown and moved out of the house. Again, broad stroke, but most people here that have kids are still pretty young, as evidenced by the journey. If you look over in our kids program, I just know, being one of those families, we've got young kids, we got a kid in high school, got 2 elementary age daughters, that life in general can be busy. Then for us, at least in our dynamic, you add the kids and their busyness in. Sometimes it can just feel like we are ships passing in the night. And I'd love to have you guys speak just for a minute, if you can, to like, what are practical things that you do to try and keep passion and romance and just that type of connection? And some of your kids are in here, they're like, no, please don't talk to that. But like, how do you keep that connection in the midst of all this busyness? So like, really quick, for my wife and I, we have this one thing I learned years and years ago. It's very simple, but it just goes like this: try and make a moment out of a minute. You know, early on, we did a lot of trips and vacations. We didn't have kids for 6 years, and so we got in this habit of our connection was doing these weekends away or trips, and then that's just not been our reality for the last number of years. And so we've had to learn how to just take, if it's even just a simple minute in the kitchen, to turn it into a moment. And whether that's that we just get passionate and I grab her and kiss her, or we cuddle up on the couch. I regularly hear these days from my kids, "Ew, Dad, you're gross, stop it." We even went on vacation recently, and we all had to share the same hotel room, and we were going to bed one night, lights are off, my wife and I are giggling in our bed, and my daughter goes, "Dad, be appropriate, we're in the room." And I was like, to which I replied, "Want a little brother?" So they didn't, and they didn't. But our kids know, like, Mom and Dad love each other, and we're appropriate, but they will be grossed out by us. It's just the reality, because we're going to take the minutes we get and turn them into moments. How do you guys do that?
Go grocery shopping.
Grocery shopping.
I've already said my piece on that.
How about anybody else? How you do it?
You know what's something, I mean, it's simple for us. We do have 7 kids, and we have them all over the spectrum. And so getting away and having like dates and weekends away just has not been our reality. Now that they're getting older, maybe we have actually more time to talk and have conversations at home, which is huge. And I find a lot of times, so our dynamic is a little different. Dennis is retired police officer and detective, and now psychologist, therapist. So that can be pretty interesting at times, and he has a lot of clients that he'll come home and share with, and that to me, and I don't know if I've ever even told him that, but it's interesting because he will come home and he will talk. Obviously, he doesn't tell me names or anything like that, but just scenarios of relationships, and he does a lot of marriage counseling, and through that, it's kind of fun because it's a good way to connect, but it also is helpful and beneficial because he's sharing with me certain situations which these clients are going through, which some of them I can actually go, oh, I get it, and I empathize with her. I could see that. But then it causes me to kind of check myself, and I don't know, it's almost like a learning tool for me as I'm hearing how he would counsel these people, but then he actually asks my opinion, which is kind of neat and honoring to me. But it's a way for us to connect, and a lot of times we're just connecting about jobs and work, and the day. But it's been nice because over the years, we've literally not even had time to talk in our own home. So now as our kids are getting older, yeah, we're making, moments out of minutes. Just simple. So it doesn't always have to be, I mean, if you have 2 kids, it's easy to get away and go on vacations. But I just, for anybody that has like multiple kids like we do, which I absolutely love, be realistic too. Sometimes that's not always possible, and make moments out of minutes, and we do now, just being at home talking about the day.
And just adding to that, I think kind of like Craig's point with the moments out of minutes, whatever time you have. So maybe you're driving in the car and it's a quick phone call, or maybe you're at the office working and you have time to send a quick text with an emoji or something like that. So whatever it is, make it something, as opposed to taking more of a kind of a passive role in the relationship, or a role where you're almost becoming kind of distracted by other things, and a relationship is compromising, or is being compromised.
Now, Dennis, as a therapist, you shared in the first service that you have a unique way of referring to date nights.
We go on
Those
dates.
would be.
Yeah, so my Rebecca calls them dates, and I call them rituals of connection. and so that's therapist talk. The same point.
How many women would actually get excited if your husband said that to you? Can we go on a ritual of connection tonight?
Or a conflict walk. That was
another
We
conflict
go
walk.
on conflict walks too.
Sign me up.
Now, earlier in the first service, Tim had mentioned about the simple things of holding hands. Holding hands with your wife or your significant other, and making moments out of that. Tammy and I, same thing. In the car, we hold hands, driving down the road. Doesn't matter if there's 6 people in the vehicle with us or if it's just her and I. But it's just simple things like that. When your significant other, your wife, grabs your hand and just starts, rubbing your fingers with her fingers, or, my wife, sometimes she'll reach over and she'll just kind of rub my chin while I'm driving. It's simple moments like that, simple minutes like that, turn them into moments. It's really great to just, to have that. And, I guess that's kind of how we're fortunate enough to be able to kind of do what we want when we want, I guess you'd say, even though we have 6 kids. My kids aren't around a lot. And the 2 that are home more than the others are old enough to take care of themselves. So we have that fortunate opportunity to kind of do what we want. So we go camping, we go kayaking, and we spend our time together. But just the little tiny things like holding hands I've found to be very important in our marriage.
When Bruce and I had a busier season of life with the kids, when they were doing sports and different things like that, even just making dinner together, cleaning up the kitchen together, going on errands together.
I do dishes.
Yes.
You cook.
I cook, he cleans. It's a good system. But then even earlier in our marriage, he was out doing something on the car, and I don't do things on the car. And he said, well, why don't you just sit on the grass while I'm changing the tires or whatever he was doing? And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, just visit with me, talk with me while I'm doing activities or doing chores. And so we've done that too. So we've connected over just the mandatory things of the household and the running of the family by doing them together.
So you guys could probably talk for hours, and we'd love to hear more of your stories, Rick. But
next week we're selling tickets.
I got 1 million of them.
I know. I'd love, because we do have to be honoring time and bring it to a close here in a couple minutes. But and you guys have touched on this a little bit. A couple of you have. But can you take just a brief minute and get really specific about what it is that you do in your relationship to actively keep Jesus as a part of it? And I know it looks different for every individual. That looks different for every marriage. But all of you have both alluded in the first service a little bit now, and I know it just in my relationships with you, that your walk with the Lord is not just a part of your life, it's a center of your life. And as such, it has become a center of your marriage. So what are the practical ways that you have done that to keep Jesus at the center of this relationship?
We serve together, and we serve apart. But we have made church our priority. We've made God our priority first. He's first in our marriage, and we are second to in our marriage. We are second, and we put our kids third, and they know that, and they're better for it. But Tim said in the beginning, and even when we were discussing these questions, we've gone to church together since we were 16, and so we worship side by side, and we pray for each other, and it's the very core of who I am, is loving Jesus. And so I wanted to have, even when I was a little girl, I remember thinking that I wanted my husband to love Jesus. And I've seen so much growth in Tim, even since we've been here, in his relationship with Jesus, that when I see him raise his hand in worship, it just really does something for me inside. And it strengthens our marriage, loving Jesus together.
And I think when she says we've worshiped together, church wasn't an option. Coming in and recognizing the importance of that time, you can serve God and never walk through a church door. I agree with that. I don't, people will have that argument. But there's something valuable about making the effort to come out and worship. And a lot of people will go to work and they'll be half dead, but they won't come to church if they got the sniffles, right? And I think for us, we've made church such an important part that we come to worship together, because we want God to be that focus, and we want to be able to demonstrate that outwardly. And you can, like I said, you can do that sitting at home watching TV, but we just felt that there's a reason to go to church, and there's a reason to worship together and make that time a part of our life and a part of our commitment.
Greg, can I just say one quick thing? It's not what you just said, but there was a time where we were kind of struggling in our marriage, mostly me, at my old church, and I went and talked to my pastor's wife about it, and she gave me Philippians 4:8, the scripture. She says, think on these things, whatever's pure, whatever's good, whatever's true, think on these things. And that has helped me so much in our marriage. With any struggles we had, I would think on that. He has his faults in a lot of ways, but he's better.
In a lot of ways.
But he's better. He's more good than bad. So I would think of that scripture every time, and that would just bring me through a lot of things.
And I think too, for me, for faith, and I remember early in our marriage, I was struggling internally, and I was reading a book called Your Husband, Your Friend. And in a part of that book, it just hit me, like God just spoke to my heart, and all the time I was saying, you made him, you fix him. I can't fix him, obviously, so you made him, you fix him. And I remember God just gently speaking to my heart saying, what about you? I need to fix you. If I can, let me fix you, and that will help fix him. So with that, it's just, it's a strength to me. It's a strength I have to draw on. I have to just remember that I can't fix him, so when I get frustrated, I just say, you made him, you fix him.
Thanks. So here's the hard thing about a day like today. I would love to let you guys keep talking, but we could probably go into the afternoon, and so we probably should start to draw it to a close. But like I said at the start of the morning, they're not up here just to be a one and done. Now they're off the stage. Thanks for your time. Their desire to be on the stage was largely so that if they can be a service to you off the stage, they will be, and they want to be. So we're going to dismiss them off the stage in just a moment, but at the end of the morning, when the band's done with this last song, they're going to come back up and just stand in the front. And whether you want to come talk to them today or just maybe talk to them another time when it's not here in front of everybody, that's part of what they hope would be the result of this morning, is that they can serve you in this way beyond this stage. So one last time, would you guys just thank them for their time here and for their willingness to be honest and open with you? Awesome. So as they leave the stage, so we're going to bring it to a close with one last song this morning. And Kind of like I said this morning about communion, this is one of those moments where, particularly for us, because we do this most Sundays, we have a last song that we do. Like communion, you can kind of just go through the motion and miss the point of it. So let me remind you really quick why we do this. It's not just to have a closing song, because we always do a closing song. It's because if you're sitting out there in the seat, if I'm sitting out there in the seat, let me speak to me, I'm going to need a minute to figure out what to do with this moment. Like, what do I take away from here? What do I process? What do I take to God when I walk out these doors? What do I need to wrestle with? What do I agree with? What do I disagree with? What do I need to take to somebody else and talk to me about? What do I maybe need to take to my spouse? What am I going to walk out of here with as I walk out these doors? That's the point. And sometimes the song, maybe you just need to outpour something that you feel for God in that last couple of moments. Or maybe you just need to be quiet and let him inpour. Let him just give you a thought that you need. Let him draw all of this to a point of conclusion for you today of what you need to do or what you need to feel or what you need to think as you walk out these doors. But the last thing that we want is just to go so habitually through the motions on a Sunday morning that when it comes to a close, we just run out of here and don't ask ourselves, what do I do with what I heard? And so I hope that there's something that you heard today, that there is an impact that it drew on you, that there's something worth doing with it. And maybe you just need that moment to figure out what that is. And as we go through this last moment, and as we go into this last song, is also when for us as a community, we're going to take up our offering. Now, before anybody grabs a bucket and knows what to do, just hold on. For us at Paradox, when we take up our offering, again, it's not just because this is what a church does. It's because we absolutely believe that God emptied himself, everything he is, onto the cross on our behalf. The scriptures say every good thing comes from above. And so we are compelled then to give back to him out of the generous nature that he has already given to us. We don't do it because we have to. We do it because we get to. And so if Paradox is your church, then you know what to do at this moment. But I would also say to you, those of you that this isn't your church or you're still trying to figure out even God, you're certainly welcome to participate. But we believe that Jesus is a giver, not a taker, and we're not here to take anything from you. We're here to give to you. But if you have received from him, we'd encourage you to give back. So here's how we do it. There's a bucket on your right side. If you're all the way at the end of the row, would you just grab it and pass it on down? When it gets to the far end, set it on the floor, and there will be some people that come by that will collect that. But over this last couple of minutes as we close, just ask the question, what do I do with what I heard?
We are so glad that you guys came out this morning. You are very loved. A couple reminders, take your invite cards and be praying for the person that you want to invite. And all the couples that were up here are going to be up here to talk with you and pray with you at the end of the service if you guys want to come up and have that prayer. And again, we love you guys so much.